Welcome everybody to People and Purpose First. I'm Michael Dodson. I am the Administrative Assistant of the Wond'ry, and today we have presenting from Vanderbilt University's Peabody College. We have Susan Douglas and Jeremiah Palmer, and I will turn it over to them.
Thank you, Michael. Jeremiah and I are excited to be here with you today. Where we are in the world right now is very different compared to just a few short weeks ago. And back then, we chose this image. Our adrenaline was pumping as we were preparing ourselves for the sprint to transition to working from home and dispersed teams. And now we find ourselves, as the world is opening up, it's time for us to do some reflection on what do we want to bring forward from what we've been doing as part of our new normal, readying ourselves for the marathon ahead. So I'm Susan Douglas. I am faculty at Vanderbilt University and on the leadership team for Behavioral Healthcare Technology Company, as well as an executive and team coach. Here with my partner, Jeremiah.
Thanks, Susan. Hi, everyone. Jeremiah Palmer. I am a leadership coach and a teacher into all things transformation, and I'm a learning and development professional in my other life. And we're excited to have you all here and excited to be joined by Dan Wilson, who is moderating for us today. Dan, want to give everyone a quick intro of yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Dan Wilson. I just graduated on Friday with my master's in higher education administration from Peabody, hence the background that I have not taken down yet. And I am excited to look through your comments and questions and make sure that Susan and Jeremiah can try to address them as best that they can.
Awesome. And yes, congrats, Dan. Huge accomplishment and some exciting news you received today on what his future might be holding as well. So that's terrific. Just as a reminder, we're recording this today. Okay, so just so everyone is aware of that. And we're looking to engage with you. So as Dan mentioned, we'll be looking to see your comments in the chat. We'll have a poll that we'll use. You're always free to jump in from a voice perspective as well. And without further ado, let's just talk a little bit about where we're going over the course of the next 50 minutes or so. As Susan said, this is all about people and purpose first. And so we're focusing on teaming strategies that put people first, especially in an environment that is complex and uncertain and very ambiguous, and also focuses on purpose first, right? Which is really, really important. And we're doing all of that, keeping in mind sort of the environment that we're in and how we're all working in new and different ways than we probably did, just a few weeks or months ago. That's where we're heading over the next 50 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremiah. And so I'll take it from there. And just before we get started, we just want to have us all on a level playing field. Teams, they're the basic building blocks of any learning organization. And Michael West has some great research out there where we're actually talking about real teams. People can work in functional groups. You can be working on a project together, but real teams need to be able to answer yes to these three questions. Do you have a few clear objectives that you need to achieve as a team? Do you work together to achieve these objectives? And do you meet regularly to review progress and how that can be reviewed or how that can be improved? So that's not what we're talking about today. If you think about the characteristics of teams, or even think about high-performing teams, they have a defined membership, they have interdependent tasks, mutual accountability, and a common goal. And for high-performing teams, you really want these things to come together so you can not only meet but exceed goals and expectations both internally and externally. But where we are right now is we want to help you move beyond that basic notion. I think one of the problems with when we talk about high-performing teams is that it becomes like a checkbox. And we don't think of a team or teaming strategies as a place of arrival. It's a lifelong journey. So, we've all been focused on, what we need to do to get through the lockdown. And that can be kind of a stuck place. But where we're headed today is really what can we learn and take from this period that's going to move us into the next phase, to help us be future fit for what is coming in the next few years as we transition through the global pandemic, the financial implications, and the public health implications as well. So, Jeremiah?
Yeah, so we want to kick off by getting you involved, right? So there is a question on the screen. You can use your chat box to answer this, and we'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. So it's pretty quick reflection. So thinking back over the last 6 weeks, pretty tumultuous, what have you found most challenging for your team? And again, you can just post those right in the chat box.
Oh, that's a great one. Not being able to walk into somebody's office just to ask a simple question.
Mm-hmm. Hard to do drive-bys right now for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Christopher, similar, that water cooler conversation. I love the way you connected that to the generating ideas and the listening, the communication, feeling connected.
Yeah, great. And we could probably brainstorm others for sure that we've all sort of felt along the way. So keep those coming. We'll capture those.
Mm-hmm.
But we're curious if you take it, as Susan has primed us, we've been in this space, but if we turn our eyes to the future, right, and think about the next 6 months, what's the work that your team needs to be doing together? So again, give you about 30 seconds to reflect and put those thoughts in the chat box. Over the next 6 months, what's the work that your team needs to be doing together? Yeah, interesting. Unstated assumptions.
Mm-hmm. Doing work remotely and safely.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Carolyn, going from an event office to a virtual event office.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Tightening communication, supporting each other.
Mm.
Oh my gosh, Christopher, again, that Zoom fatigue. And we're contributing to it by having a Zoom meeting with you. Thank you for participating through that.
It's such a great point, though. It is a real thing. Yeah, I love it. Nice comment, Susan. We'll talk a little bit about that. In fact, how do we have really good focus on our own well-being as we respond, to others' needs, our customers' needs, our employees' needs, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. And being able to do that in an agile manner as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Wonderful.
Nice. Good. Well, let's use that as a jumping off point a bit for where we're going, because there's some good themes here around people and being people first. Many of you probably have heard of the term VUCA, a VUCA world, if you will. VUCA simply stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it's a term that's been around for several years now. And even pre-COVID, I think we would all agree that many of our worlds were becoming more VUCA in nature. But the last 6 to 8 weeks have certainly cranked up the VUCA, or at least they have in my world, and I'm guessing they may have in yours as well. And, you know, VUCA is interesting because as we get exposed more and more to that world, it can trigger for us fear, right? So as you think about things being uncertain and volatile, you know, I love this picture. It's, you know, sort of this, you know, twisted, overhanging trees. There might be something good at the end of this tunnel, maybe not. I'm not sure. I don't know. It's a little bit how I feel sometimes in the world that we're operating in. But the challenge with fear is that we know that it puts a damper on innovation. It slows down our creativity. It puts us in a place where we're really inner focused, very transactional focused, as opposed to being focused on transforming, as opposed to being focused on, you know, what's the greater thing that we're working on together. And so while it's easy to fall into that space of fear, I would say there's other responses that are available to us, right? And so a couple of those might be empathy, right? And empathy is a great thing. That's emotional connection with one another and can really be valuable. But empathy can also sort of be paralyzing or can wear on you at times. And so one related but different approach that we could choose is compassion. Think of compassion as this emotional investment that we're making in one another and in ourselves, self-compassion. And compassion leads to action, right? Compassion leads us to, you know, to make a move, to do something different in the world that we're operating in. So if those are more generative responses that we could take, if you will, in empathy and compassion, you know, where do we start? And there were some really great comments in the chat box about, well, this actually starts with me. It starts with my own well-being and self-care. You know, it reminds me, it's kind of funny to say this because I have not been on a plane in several months, but, you know, the whole conversation about fix your own mask, right, before helping others. And, you know, it's a great metaphor, honestly, for what we're suggesting here. And some of that's about being. We talked about that, emotional investment in ourselves and others. But a lot of it's also about doing, right? So, and the doing here can be a whole list of things, right? So those practices are really, really important for our own self-care, our own well-being. And we have a list of them here. They're certainly not exhaustive, right? But mindfulness practices can be really powerful, right? It could be a meditation practice. It could be yoga. It could be going on just a mindful walk. Exercise, right? Taking care of our physical body. Some of us, well, I'll just point to myself, sometimes live from here up. But there's a whole body that's involved that needs tending to. Setting limitations on our work, right? The boundaries have really blurred in this current world. You know, work is happening in my home and school is happening in my home for my 2 kids. There's a lot of, you know, risk to not hold those boundaries, but setting limits on work and when you'll work and how you work can be really powerful for your own care. And then engaging for relationship, right? There was a couple of comments as well in the chat box around missing that connection, right? And my own team that I manage, their comments to me about how they're getting through this and missing that human connection. There's still an opportunity, though, even in this space, to engage in relationship. It might be a different sort of engagement as we're virtual, but can be really, really powerful. So starting with you is the place that we would suggest you begin. And we wanted to check in around that with you, right? So a question for consideration. In fact, we've got a poll, if I have this right. Yeah, there it comes up on the screen. So invite everyone to answer the poll question. On a scale of 1 to 5, how satisfied are you currently, right, with your level of practices related to well-being?
We'll give it a few more seconds. Looks like we have most of the responses in. Try to get a couple more.
Yeah, nice. So, it looks like that, most of us would say, you know what, I'm kind of, in the middle, sitting in that middle ground, if you will, a few of us on either side of that. And that's great. It's always wonderful to know where you are, to figure out where you want to go. So our next question, sort of building on this one, is what would it take, right? What would it take to just move one notch up the scale from where you are today? So if you entered a 3, what would it take to make it to a 4? Or if you were a 2, what would it take to make it to a 3? So invite you to, again, 30 seconds or so, put that in the chat box. What might you do or commit to that would make that shift for your own self-care? What are some ideas that you're considering?
Sleep. That is actually an issue I hear a lot of people talking about with the general level of anxiety that we have in our environment.
No doubt. And I'm seeing some comments on, getting out and moving, exercising. I can relate to that one.
Snacking under stress.
I unfortunately can also relate to that one. Yeah, so some good comments here about, being intentional with the scheduling of that, right? Yeah, there we go. Christopher kind of talking about those boundaries. How do we manage that balance between work and life? Yeah, terrific. So these are great. My challenge, our challenge to you would be, as we keep moving on from start with yourself, these ideas that you're putting into the chat box, make a commitment around that. Right? Make a commitment about moving that forward and think about how you might hold yourself accountable to take some of these steps, right? So once you've started with yourself, right, which is where you've got to start, then it gives you the opportunity to attend to your team, right? And a couple things to really focus on there. One is role, clarity, right? And the other is purpose. And Susan's going to get into purpose in far greater depth. But role, like being really clear on routines, right? Expectations, structure, all those pieces can be really grounding for your team. Right? You have a good sense of what are we up to? Who's doing what? What's my lane, if you will? And at the same time, you don't want to just have structure without meaning. People crave to understand why their work matters. What's the purpose behind it? Right? And having both of those can be really valuable in terms of building resilience as a team. I know what we're up to together and it's meaningful for me, okay? So start with yourself, attend to your team, and after that, we'd also suggest that you continue to experiment and learn, right? So this sort of seems obvious, but it's an easy one to forget. Right, so some of you might be familiar with Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset versus fixed mindset. The growth mindset really hinges on trying things, right? Experimenting, leaning in, being willing to fail, and knowing that that's about me learning and growing and not about me being a failure just because I tried something and it didn't go the way that I wanted. So have that growth mindset and then make a disruption part of the routine. Right? It's really easy to say, well, we need to be more disruptive as a team. We need to try new things. That's great. That intention's wonderful. Making it part of the structure, part of the routine is freeing. It gives everyone the freedom to lean into that and a good reminder to go after that. And be intentional about that, right? This doesn't just happen on its own. Being intentional about those learning opportunities that you want to create and how those are going to lead to your growth individually and collectively as a team is a really powerful place to be. Okay, so again, start with yourself, attend to your team, and experiment and learn along the way. Great tools for being people first. Okay, so what we have now is sort of a little bit of a, I won't say a commercial, but a little bit of a, hey, with that in mind, how do you humanize as you digitize, right? So how do we get to some more of the tactical takeaways from that? Again, I would remind us that we should focus on communication and relationship, right? So think of tools as supporting the people as opposed to just things that we use to get stuff done, right? So what's the right conferencing app, right? How does it make us connected? What are chat apps like Slack, right, that we want to be able to incorporate and utilize? What are scheduling apps, right, so that we can manage our work-life balance, so that we can find time for ourselves to go do that exercise if we need to, et cetera. And then practices, right, practices that we can implement that really also continue to help us to put people first, right? So that could be office hours that we hold for our team. That could be scheduling time for other things besides just the work as a team. Right? How do we do virtual happy hours? You know, how do we connect with one another just to connect? You know, a lot of you mentioned being able to stop by the water cooler or just connect or run by somebody's office. How do you use technology and practices to support those sorts of relational touch points, even if you're not doing it face-to-face, right? Which can be really, really important. And then lastly, a tool that Susan and I love, and we've used in other group settings, is have a check-in to start a meeting. It could be any question, really. It's a great way to be creative. Give your team the opportunity to check in with one another and start with the people aspect before you dive into the content for the meeting. Okay, so just a few tips and tricks as you think about humanizing as you digitize. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Susan to talk a little bit about how we put purpose first as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremiah. You know, we're all members of virtual teams right now, and that focus on task can just start to add to the social isolation. And as much as we spent our children's formative years telling them too much screen time is not a good thing, we're having to refigure our relationship with screens. And I think we can do that in some intentional ways. So I'm talking about purpose also first. And hopefully you can see how these two topics interweave, because being able to have people first and purpose as well is key to what we're talking about today, to future fit our teams. So I love this quote. As we were preparing for today's workshop, I did some reading on shared purpose in corporations, and came across this quote by the author of The Little Prince. If you want to build a ship, you don't drum up people to collect wood, and you don't assign them tasks and work, but rather you teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. That is purpose. That's shared purpose. And a team is defined by its purpose. It is not the organization's mission or vision. Peter Hawkins talks about that as a yesterday's organization. NASA had a mission. Columbus had a mission. It's also not the task that the team is trying to achieve, or even the team's function. Often we confuse that with purpose. But what shared purpose is, it's shaped by the team. It existed before that team existed, and the team is, their job is to find that and to respond to that purpose. And again, from Peter Hawkins' work, which Jeremiah and I have used for a couple of years with our team coaching at the Wond'ry, the way that he defines shared purpose is that it comes from the outside in. It can't be defined by within the organization. You have to go out into the environment and the larger ecology. And it's also operationalized from the future back. What is it our team contributes to the world that we are uniquely suited to do that will impact our children's children? That is shared purpose. It's the purpose that creates the team, not the team. The need and the purpose is already out there in the world waiting for a team to respond. So the idea here is that purpose is, it's a glue that can hold a team together, and it's a magnet that can bring new members to your team, that can attract talent. And indeed, that's the case for shared purpose. There's quite a bit of research in this area over the last 6 or 7 years. And what we really see is that when organizations have a strong purpose, they are better at attracting and retaining talent. It translates to customer loyalty and trust, even through missteps. There's an increased return for shareholders, and there is more organizational growth for organizations and teams with a strong purpose. So let's do some reflection and engagement here. And we can do this in the chat, because this is kind of doing more of a reflection than a poll. I want you to think about both the worst team that you've encountered and the best team. Let's start with the worst team first. And just take about 30 seconds. And I want you to reflect on what you noticed about people's sense of shared purpose. So get that team in your head, about their energy and sense of direction, how they behave towards each other. In that worst team that you've encountered, how did they coordinate tasks, roles, and responsibilities, or adapt to changes and setbacks? How did they engage with stakeholders? So with that worst team that you've encountered in your mind, you can think of a situation, just kind of let it wash over you. What are some of the things that, now that you look back at that and you notice? So we're seeing some comments now. So resentment, not being safe. So you didn't have that psychological safety. Kevin, everyone had a different agenda. So you had a lot of independent tasks or goals, but not much interdependency.
Yeah, I like Michael's example, right, of individual, but no way to achieve them, right? It's very similar to Kevin's.
Yes, and when you have those individual quotas, that is also yesterday's organization, where you're going to promote and reinforce based on individual metrics instead of team metrics. A lack of cohesion.
And no one seemed interested in the overall achievement. What a great way to capture that.
And imagination's running wild. I imagine this could be a situation perhaps where there's a lack of authentic communication. There's little conflict management or the reinforcement for engaging in that. And these things affect the bottom line. They affect a team's ability to move towards that purpose and to achieve their goals. So now switch a little bit. Oh, and then another comment, not getting enough of a team's time and not enough attention. So now if you kind of wash that out of your mind, now you're thinking about the best team that you've encountered. And hopefully we all have an experience with a best team where you just felt supercharged by being part of that team, or being able to even observe that team from the outside. And let's do the same reflection here. What did you notice, or what do you now reflect back on and notice about that team's sense of shared purpose? their energy and sense of direction, their behavior towards each other, coordination on tasks and roles and responsibilities, their ability to adapt to setbacks, and how they engaged with stakeholders. And when you're ready, feel free to share those reflections in the chat. Helen is sharing, team members were there because they wanted to be. There was a commitment that was genuine and heartfelt.
I love Carolyn's, the positivity was contagious. There's an energy there that can be felt.
That energy that feeds upon itself and creates more positivity. Yes, and everyone was looking for ways to take everyone forward almost without thought. That is the essence of mutual accountability, that you're not in this to get your job done. You're in this to move that purpose forward. And if you see a team member who could use some help, you reach out. That safety and being able to be authentic and showing up as our best selves. So that captures it, I think. That captures the connection between people first and purpose first. It's a dual focus for a team and for a team's leader to ensure that there is attention to both. So thank you all for sharing those reflections. That was really powerful. And what I would ask you to do is, in surfacing your team's shared purpose, it's really about asking questions. Because again, like I said, purpose is shaped by the team. It's not something that is, you develop a purpose and then you form a team around it. Oh, sorry, I went off video. So you can ask these kinds of questions to surface your team's shared purpose. Who does our work serve? What are our future stakeholders asking us to step up to? What would we regret in 2 years' time not having explored now? These are just some of the questions you can ask. But what a team leader can do is bring these back to the team and have these be part of that reflection, part of that check-in or agenda time during a meeting. You can also ask your clients some of these questions as well, and others. And then given the responses from this initial set of questions, that leads to a new set. If this is our purpose, what is the work our team needs to be doing together? And how can we increase our team's impact? Likely what you'll find is that the work you need to be doing together may overlap with what you're doing now, but it is likely to be a little bit different at least. And it gives you a lot of ability to move forward with that sense of purpose to grow your team. So I like what you said, Jeremiah, our commercial break. So when we're doing this in the virtual setting, when we're working with displaced teams, and I've worked remotely for, in face-to-face and in remote work for 20 years now. And technology can be something that feels like it's between us, but if we're intentional about it, as Jeremiah was saying, it can bring us together. So some of the tools here really are about, if you're going to move forward with shared purpose, there has to be a lot of opportunity for your team members to come together and to share. Those virtual collaboration tools like Mural, or I just learned about a new one, Padlet.com, where it's easy to share ideas and pull them together in a way that builds and grows and allows them to be shaped by the team. A central information hub where you're doing things like you're versioning documents and you're allowing for that collaborative work to happen. And then, you know, David Allen talks about systems you can trust. That's one of my favorite phrases, because when we have systems that can hum quietly in the background, we know information is captured, we know communication can happen, then we can focus on the content of it. We can focus on the relationship that stems from those things, instead of, you know, needing to be down in the weeds and focusing on the tasks of setting up those systems. Fostering a mindset of experimentation, you know, asking your team about shared purpose, it is truly, you know, a horizontal idea, and allowing those ideas to come forth. You're asking people about their connections to their children's children's children, that purpose lives far beyond any one of you. And then, just as Jeremiah talked about the check-in, we also recommend a check out at the end of meetings. So the check-in is a way to connect at a relationship level. A check out is a way to connect about what are we going to do next. So therefore, from this purpose from which we spring, what is our next action? And always connecting actions and performance to purpose. So this is our checkout for today. You know, going forward, we would ask you to reflect on the questions that we've raised in this workshop today, and consider bringing them to your teams and workplaces. What is the longing, the deeply felt longing that will drive your team? And what is the dream, that collaborative goal that would wake up your team members every day? I think one of you said that in the chat, you know, you just want to go to work. You want to be with that team. What is going to be that collaborative goal that will make your team want to strive towards that dream? Jeremiah, I'll switch over to you.
Yeah, lovely. So what are the key takeaways? What would we want you to leave today with sort of front of mind? Well, one, people and purpose first. If you leave with that as a frame, that would be success. When we talked about people first, again, it's starting with yourself. You can't shortchange that. If you're not attending to yourself, it's really difficult to attend successfully to your team. But once you have attended to yourself, do attend to the team, right? Find ways to make that connection really meaningful. And then experiment and learn. I think that's always useful, but in times of high VUCA world where it is really hard to know what's coming and hard to know what's causing what, this is a great time to be experimenting and learning our way forward. As Susan talked about, it's not just people first, it's purpose first. And as your answers to the questions really made it clear, those two are so interwoven together. It's hard to have one without the other. And purpose first is about shared purpose. And I love the way Susan phrased that, from the outside in, right? So it's not something that we have to, you know, find in here. It's out there. How do we bring it in? And future back. And I love when Susan talks about, you know, what's the impact to my children's children's children, right? And having that longer term horizon about what we're up to together is really powerful. How do you get to the purpose? Well, we've been doing that throughout this entire session. Use inquiry, right? Use really thoughtful questions. Pose those to yourself, pose those to the team, and see what emerges. There's clues in the answers to really thoughtful questions. And then use purpose as a magnet, right? Just think about this in your own life. Think of people that you know that they have really clear purpose. They're all about it. they draw people to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The same with a team. If you're really clear on your purpose, you will draw in people that want to be a part of that. You'll draw in resources, et cetera. And you'll draw in consumers in the world who feel a resonance with that purpose. And then lastly, humanize as you digitize, right? So we didn't want to overly focus on all the tools and practices. We wanted to incorporate those in this broader frame of people and purpose first, but they're important, right? And they're very important in this time frame when there's Zoom fatigue and we're all running around virtually trying to connect. Use those digital tools and practices intentionally and use them to connect with one another and use them to continue to find purpose and to reinforce your purpose. So if you're taking anything away from today, those would be the ones that we would love for you to have front and center.
Thanks, Jeremiah. So we have time for questions. We wanted to let you know that we can make these slides available to anybody who would like them. Just reach out and connect with us. We have our email addresses here. And if you're interested in exploring how to invest in your team's development, we would be happy to talk to you about that. So Dan, I know you were keeping up with the chat. Do you see any patterns or themes that you think would be important for us to bring out here?
Yeah, I know a lot of the comments really addressed communication and psychological safety. And something that I'm wondering is how, before this pandemic started, if a workplace did not have a good level of psychological safety and it was not making communication patterns as good and useful as they should be, how can, in the virtual environment, leaders address the past psychological safety issues that was occurring and make it better in the present?
Those are great questions. So let me see if I can restate that and throw that out to Jeremiah as well. So this idea that you're already starting from somewhat of a deficit where you were in an organization with poor communication and a lack of psychological safety, and you're moving into a virtual world. How can team leaders address that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think, I've got a couple ideas. Jeremiah, would you like to step in first?
Yeah, it's a great question. Psychological safety, I don't think is, it's not curtailed or limited just because we're in a virtual setting, but it's got to start if you're coming from a deficit, in my mind, with the leader. The leader's got to make that first move, start with him or herself, and role model that. The challenge when you're already in a system and there's a deficit is you need lots of signals that it's okay, that it's safe to ask for feedback, that it's safe to try things and fail. It's really a mindset shift that's required from the top. And then you've got to reinforce that. In my mind, there's got to be reinforcing mechanisms that indeed there is this space and it's safe. And until people see enough examples of that and hear that over and over enough to really believe it, they're going to be hesitant, especially if they're coming anchored or primed to an experience that says it's not safe. And again, I don't think you need to be face-to-face to create psychological safety, but my gut tells me it's probably more challenging to do virtually because the connection's just a little bit different, right, than when you're face-to-face. So those would be my initial thoughts. Susan, curious what you think.
Yeah, I think what I have to add to that is just a story. You're reminding me of a retired CEO of a Fortune, 500 company, and he took this company from being in somewhat bad shape to, being highly productive and highly successful, and really bringing in that return on investment for the shareholders. One of the ways that he did that was he came into a setting where there was pretty poor psychological safety. And as the leader, he saw it as his job to establish new norms and new expectations. And he knew that the way he could make that happen wasn't just by telling people about these new ideas. He had to live it. So one of the things that he instituted was a basically tell me when I'm wrong approach. And he had to seed it at first to give people enough courage to bring forth some ideas that when they thought he was wrong. And he did that over and over again in front of the team. And that's part of what made his team, that communication get better. So it's that signaling idea, and it's that leader's role. Other thoughts?
Yeah, no, and I think that definitely makes sense too, especially with what you two were talking about, with scheduling in that disruption into the workplace culture and really allowing for that psychological safety and just failure to live.
And some of it, we're talking about some of the big ways, the smaller signals, they're just as important.
Yeah.
And so the office hours, the time for non-task time, beginning a meeting with the check-in around what were your highs and lows over the last week. You do that over and over, and if the leader is engaging in that authentically, some very simple and what seem like very small practices start to have a big difference over time. They really reshape the culture of the team.
And that invitation to start with yourself, to really attend to your own well-being and energy, I think is critical, right? Because we all have reactivity within us. You know, there's certain triggers that we have that we react to. You've got to be really thoughtful about those, aware about those in situations like that, right? Because if you snap because someone's bringing you quote unquote bad news and you haven't grounded yourself, you might kill a lot of the good work that you put together in the organization to build that safety. So again, starting with yourself, building up your own resilience, your own ability to manage that reactivity can be really powerful.
Well, we want to be respectful. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead, Susan.
Oh, I was just going to say, we want to be respectful of people's time. We started a little bit late today just because we wanted to give everyone a chance to get in. We had some connection problems, virtual teams, virtual problems. And so Jeremiah and I are happy to stay on for a few more minutes if anybody has any other comments or questions or issues to bring up. But otherwise, again, feel free to connect with us. We'd love to hear from you. We have these slides. We also have some references in the back. Can't do anything without citing a lot of others' really good work. All right. Thank you, everyone.